Good morning, ma'am. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am so excited to do this with you today because we
Good.
have been working on getting you passing this exam, and it's a lot, isn't it? It's just a lot of information.
It is. Yeah.
But the good news is I can see your progress. I see how you are learning and you're getting better, and I love that for you. But we're going to talk about a couple things today. We're going to really hone down on some techniques to help you take better notes or basically rearrange your notes. Because I believe that learning happens basically in three phases. And that is, you got to get the information in, you got to have access to that information.
Mhm.
Then you've got to process it, like make it yours, really make sure you understand it and it becomes part of your knowledge base. And then you have the skill of, can I answer questions on it? Can I break down those questions and pull the knowledge that I have out when I need it? Because you can learn all of this, but if you can't answer the questions right, you're kind of screwed,
Then
correct?
you have a problem. Yeah.
So I did a thing for you, and I'm going to pull it up right now, because I know I've talked about all of this, and it gets to be a lot. So I made a sheet for you of some of my favorite YouTube videos on how to study mind mapping. Like you've heard me say, questions are not the only way to study. Like you can't
Mhm.
just take questions. And I know that's my opinion, but I gave you, here's going to be a link, and I will send this PDF to you of this guy. And these are all guys who help people study for like law school or med school and things like that. So even more advanced than what we're doing, right? But
Yeah.
these are guys who talk about that kind of stuff. So I've included this video about, common mistakes people make when they're studying questions. And is it even a good idea to study questions?
Mhm.
Then this guy is one of my favorite. His name is Justin Sung, and he's on YouTube. But he talks about, okay, there's all these techniques.
Mhm.
Which ones does he think are best? Like he's a doctor, like a doctor,
Oh,
and he does this for a living. Like he has this whole group and he talks around. He has a TED Talk. When you hit TED Talk,
you're
you've
legit.
yeah, you're legit. Like
Yeah.
it's the
You're
legitness
the.
of the TED Talk. But
Yeah.
these two videos, he says, okay, we've got all these study techniques. In this first video, he says, if you don't have any training with how to study, here's where I rank these things that people do: flashcards, questions, mind mapping, all of these techniques, the Cornell method. Where do I think they go? Then he says, all right, well, if people were to actually do them effectively, like use them better, here's where I think they rank. And I think that will help you kind of decide which type of studying techniques do I want to go for? We'll be talking about mind mapping because I think it is one of the absolute best ways to do it. And he has it ranked up pretty high too.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that. But then he also has a video on how to mind map. So going even more in depth than what we're going to do today. And I know you've heard me talk about the Cornell method, just like if you were in class taking notes or if you're watching a video.
Hmm.
So these are the free videos, just some of my favorite videos. But also, if you wanted me to kind of sum up all of this stuff together, I do have my recorded webinar if you wanted to get that.
Okay.
But I just wanted you to have access to this information because knowing how to study and figuring out how you study best is going to be awesome, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. I feel like I'm kind of everywhere.
Oh my gosh. And that's what I want to do. And so we're going to break down mind mapping for just so many reasons. And one of the reasons, and I'll go here, is we know there is so much vocab. In fact, I pulled together a while back. This is just a list of vocab by topic, right? Because I don't know if your textbook has it or not, but like in the beginning of my textbook, the textbooks I use, at the beginning of every chapter, they have these vocab words.
Hmm.
So, property ownerships and interests. You got encumbrances, transfer of real property. But look at all of this for finance. Look at that. These are all vocab words for finance. That's just finance. Like for real, for real, for real.
That's a big list.
That is a big list. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how like, if I was learning a new topic or when I became an auctioneer and I had to learn this new stuff, I used mind mapping to kind of organize it in my brain, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
when you're in this class or while you're studying for this class, it's all of these words and vocab and information that you're getting in. And even if you are taking practice questions, you get this piece of knowledge, but then what? And I think mind mapping is the best way to go about this. So we'll get to that little blue thing in a second. So you got finance. I want you to start, and we're going to start this process. And I always do this with mind mapping. Give me some of the words or things that you know, just a list of vocab words, anything relating to finance. Just give me some words you know off the top of your head. No right, no wrong. Just what do you know?
With the what is it? Market cost and analysis.
Well, so that would be appraisal.
This is why I'm glad we're doing it. I get appraisal
See?
terms and costs. I'm like, or finance. I'm like,
Well, you know what? You're not crazy because if I were to say, and let's talk about it, finance versus appraisal. I mean, all of it has to do with money, right?
mhm.
All of it has to do with money, but finance is about the borrowing of money versus appraisal is about the value of something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you say cost approach, well, the cost approach we know is a way that the appraiser comes up with the value of something. So, I mean, besides the fact I just said appraiser, does that make sense? That's why it goes with appraisal and not finance. You can
Yeah.
have value of something regardless of whether or not there's a loan. Make sense?
Yeah, because when I don't know why, but like when you first said finance, I just started thinking like, oh, like the gross rent multiplier, like all of
Well, and that is good. That is good. The gross rent multiplier. So you said cost approach, and you said gross rent multiplier. Because what we'll do is we'll start with finance and then we'll come back and we'll do the same thing with appraisal. So, what
okay.
other words about finance or appraisal pop up in your head?
Um, what is it? The market data analysis, is that one of them?
Yep, there's the
Yeah.
market data analysis. And I can tell by all these words, we're going to not start with finance. We're just going to start with appraisal. We're going to just start with appraisal because you are there. You are like, I'm the appraisal brain is in it. So let's just start with appraisal. All right.
Okay.
Now, you've got these words. You got cost approach, GRM, the market data analysis. And so what I want to do is show you kind of when I get information, I talk about this list of things. And I'm going to blow this up for you a little bit. When you have a vocab word, and if you want to take a picture of this with your um, cell phone so you can look at it to the side, when you get a piece of information, whether it's a piece of vocab, is it even possible to have a piece of vocab? But you know what I mean. It's a
Yeah.
vocab word, or you take a practice exam and you learn something. You've got to process that information. Otherwise, I know you've heard my analogy about all of this information being stars in the sky. And what they've done is we've put it in constellations or chapters or topics, and
Mhm.
then they test you on the information within those constellations. So when we get a piece of information, we've got to figure out, well, yeah, this is a star in the sky, but where does it go? What constellation does it go to?
Ah.
So the questions I would have you ask would be, well, first, what does this information mean? How does it connect to the big picture? How does it relate to what I already know? Why is it important? How is it similar to other things I've learned? And then where do I place it? Now, these are not questions that you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 every time. It's just ways to think about a piece of information, right? So the first word that you said, take this back to 100%, is cost approach. So let's start here. You got this cost approach thing, and I'm going to make it go all the way over here. So if we got cost approach, what does it mean?
It when at least when I think of it, I just think of an appraiser comparing the cost of nearby properties,
Ah, okay.
right? Or
Well, so our first step is we got to define it. And the cost approach, what you just defined is actually um it is actually the sales comparison,
I get all of them mixed up.
which is also known as the market data approach.
Okay.
So what you described of, oh, let's look at near neighboring properties, that is the market data approach. But you said something else. You said it's, and I think you said it, or my imagination, it's about how the appraiser comes up with value, right?
Mhm.
You knew that though. So, okay, this is a how to find value. Because we want to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
We got to put it into place. You know that fee simple absolute has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, correct? Fee
Correct.
simple absolute has nothing to do with finding value. So we've got to put this in the big picture. The cost approach is a way to find value, and it's just one of the topics that we talk about in the appraisal or the valuation chapter. This is a whole topic. And what I would do is, if it were me, once I've got this word, cost approach, I would maybe go to my textbook. And you know, your textbook is broken down to subtopics.
Mhm.
So we want to think about what those subtopics are. Like, we know that the cost approach is a way to find value. That's one thing we talk about in this chapter. Another thing that we talk about in this chapter is what is value? So when I say that, I know you learned things like dust, demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. You
Mhm.
learned about things like the principles of value. Like, do you see how the principles of value, or dust, what is value, what makes up value, has nothing to do with how to find value? That's a different, they may connect, but that's a different topic. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah.
So even if we were to go to, and I know I'm going to go back here, look at this list. So this is our valuation list.
That's a big. Ooh,
It is a big list.
a
But
bit
let's
like
talk about the age life method. If we talk about the age life method, do you have any idea whether it is something that has to do with what is value or how to find value?
wouldn't that be how to find?
Yes, exactly. Now, that just so happens to be in the income approach. Now, I'm not sure if I've ever said this to you, but your mind mapping is not going to be a one and done. You're using the mind map to kind of help you figure out where the information goes. So if I said, and I think I said this to a student the other day, if I said, talk about cooking, and I said spatula, is a spatula a cooking tool? Is it a cooking method? Is it an ingredient? Like, do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, and this is why when we talk about doing flashcards, I say, okay, what category does it go in? Or
Hmm.
you say, we got to place the information, because once you know a spatula is a cooking tool, then it doesn't relate to the ingredients. It doesn't relate to, is it a food? It might be something and it connects to food. Maybe you're using a spatula to stir up your scrambled eggs or flip a pancake, because it seems like spatula is one of those multi-use words in the kitchen. Like,
That's
so
very true.
sometimes you use a spatula to flip a pancake, but sometimes it's, what you use to scrape the side of your batter. Like, I don't know who came up with the word spatula. We need to separate this out. But you get what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you've got income approach, and you said, I just happen to know it goes to the over here. This was the age life approach. So let's look at another word we got here. Anticipation. Just going down the list. Anticipation. Is that going to be a what is value, or is it a how to find value?
How to find
It is
or
actually not, and that's okay. It's okay. Anticipation is,
huh. Interesting.
it is a what is value. Now, what I would want you to do is, this is perfect. This takes us right back to that list, because one of the first things I said is, what does this mean? So we've come to a word that we don't know what it means. So I would look it up. Now, if you were taking a test question and you didn't know, you're like, anticipation. I've never heard of anticipation. What the freak is anticipation?
Hmm.
That's why we have this list of words. You know how when you have a PDF, you can control F and find a word?
Yes. Yeah.
So what you would do is, I told you it was valuation, we looked at it. But if you didn't know it was valuation, you would just control F this document. And then you go, oh, it's about valuation. And then you're going to go to your textbook. This is why I always talk about having a textbook.
Hmm.
And what you're going to find out is anticipation is one of the principles of value. It's the idea that things have value because you're anticipating value in the future. Like last night, let's say there was a lottery last night, and I had a non-winning lottery ticket. Does
Hmm.
last night's non-winning lottery ticket have any value to you? No.
Fortunately,
But if
no.
I had another ticket for Saturday night's drawing that could possibly be a winner, does that have value to you?
Yes.
So it has value because you're anticipating value in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're getting the idea. Like when I'm talking about mind mapping, this is not oh, I should just be able to rattle everything off. What I want you to be able to do is, now when you see anticipation, you can put it in, oh, that has to do with what is value versus how do I find value?
Hmm.
Because mind mapping is about the connections that you make. I could tell you what anticipation is. And what I see a lot of students doing is going in and you do the vocab questions on Prep Agent or any place else, or you do your flashcards, your basic flashcards, not my flashcards plus that I tell you about, but basic. And you're like, okay, I know the definition. But if you don't know where that definition meets in the world of whatever we're talking about, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So, in a perfect world, what I like to do is when I'm studying, I would go through, like I said, and say, okay, in this appraisal topic, in this chapter, I had two subtopics: what is value, and then how to find value. And then the mind map is about expanding that knowledge, filling in the details, and finding the connections between it.
Hmm.
And you can do a couple of things. You can either it's a document. It's not just one thing. You get to change it, or once you think you filled it out correctly, you could try to write it again and see what you missed, and then fill in the blanks or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we know appraisal has to do with valuation. One day I'm going to get my handwriting pretty. We know that we got how to find value, and then we got three ways to do that. Come back, color. Yeah. We got the sales comparison approach. we have the cost approach, and you have the income approach. So what I might do at this point is go through my list of words and at least put them someplace on the chart. It doesn't even have to be, you know, in any kind of order. Right now, we're just kind of grouping, or what we call chunking. Like I'm just putting the information together someplace. And then once we have a list of words, we'll figure out what their relationship is to other things. So an appraisal, we know that, like, what is an appraisal? We'll leave that alone.
Yeah.
But, and I'm going to leave alone for right now a BPO, or broker price opinion, because actually, no. Do you know what a BPO, or a broker price opinion is?
I heard my boss and his in the future one of our brokers talking about it, and I was like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of, isn't it just kind of the broker's opinion?
Opinion of price. You're absolutely right. And the reason I say let's do it is because, you know what? It turns out we could redo this section. I could redo this section and I could say, all right, where's my eraser here? I'm going to say how to find value. I'm going to move it up. Boop, 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 boop. Why I make sound effects when I do that, we will never know.
It's just adding some spice to it.
You know,
Adding
I
some
like that
flair.
spice. So we got how to find value. And we said BPO. Who does a BPO? An appraiser or an agent?
Ooh,
It's a broker price opinion. So who would be doing the BPO? An appraiser or a real estate broker?
a real estate broker?
Right. So we could break down how to find value into, hey, is it something that an appraiser is going to do? Or is it going to be something that the broker is going to do? Do you get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And that is going to be one of those things that they're going to do is a BPO. And I also know very similar, there's a CMA. So when we look at this as a whole, just looking at that, does that mind map and how I'm breaking down the information, is that, I'm hoping that it gives you a way to focus at the information differently, not
Yeah.
just where it is, but how does it connect to everything else?
Yes. Yeah, this is helping a lot. I'm more of a visual learner, so just being able to see it instead of just having crazy long notes. It's
Yeah, because crazy long notes is just a lot of information. But now we can make connections. Like we can say here, what's the difference between a BPO and a CMA? And you can think about it that way. Make sense?
yeah.
And it, for me, because if you look and you watch these videos on YouTube, those are some of my favorites. But all of these people on YouTube talk about how to study and how to make mind map. And I personally believe you don't just make one mind map, because connections are connections. I can connect a spatula to cooking on a stove or baking, but maybe not deep frying. But I
Yeah.
could also talk about spatulas relating to what types of food would you maybe touch with a spatula. I could also talk, like, do you get, so there's different connections. So in a different world and a different mind map, I could talk about how a CMA relates to, there's a relationship between CMAs and how an appraiser finds value. Like this is a versus. I could make a mind map talking about what are the differences or similarities between these two things. Do you remember when we did the do you remember when we did, where is it? This, our vocab comparison?
Yes.
It's same concept. It's connecting. So if I said, what is the connection between highest and best use and plottage? It's that same concept. What is plottage? The idea if you put two things together, two lots of land, they're each worth $10,000. That that's going to be more than, oh, I thought I turned my phone off. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm always doing that. I always forget to turn off my phone. So, this idea of highest and best use and plottage, if plottage is the idea you put, it could be worth 10,000. Other one could be worth 10,000. You put them together, it's not just worth 20,000, it's worth 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
And highest and best use is this idea that when an appraiser comes up with value, they're looking at the highest and best use of the property. So, now that you've got this giant lot from the two, is its best use to use it as a parking lot, or is it better to put in a gas station? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, they're related.
Yeah.
So that idea of a relationship, or basically talking about, going back here, no, there it is. We could do a whole different mind map, or just kind of organizing our thoughts on what is the relationship? How is a CMA different than what an appraiser does? Because both of those are ways to come up with a price or a value. I mean, we don't come up with value as agents, but you're coming up with a dollar amount that relates to it. How is it different? How is it similar? What's going on? And thinking about it, because this is where that application and analysis comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If you can understand it and you can talk about compare and contrast a CMA to, do you remember those
Yeah.
questions in school?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I kind of love those questions and I kind of hate them.
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day. So, you see what I mean when I say these questions come in? Like, we had to ask ourselves, what does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
How does it connect to the big picture? How does it relate to what I already know? So, one of the words we came up with was the age life approach. How does it relate? Like, it happens to relate to the income approach. Like, everything has a relationship. So let's just say we had this outline. You studied the other day, this is the outline you had. One of the things you can do is then go in and focus in on one of these sections. So let's say we wanted to work on the income approach. And actually, why am I losing my mind? I take back everything I said. This doesn't go here. Losing my mind. Do you happen to know where the age life method goes? Here. The age life method goes here. It's what happens when I try to talk and teach. So let's talk about this age life method. I'm going to break down instead the cost approach. I don't know why I thought I wanted to put it in the age life in the income approach, but that's okay. This is why I love a mind map, because if you realize you're in the wrong place or it connects someplace differently, just change your friggin' mind map. It's
Mm-hmm.
not written in ink. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but it's digital ink, so we can erase it and put it where it belongs.
Exactly.
So if we just do a cost approach, okay, if we just do a cost approach, we're going to take a look at, okay, well, how does the cost approach relate and differ between the sales comparison approach and the income approach? So we know all three have to do with finding value that
Mm-hmm.
is used by an appraiser, but how are they different? Do you know anything? Can you what do you know about all three, or just the cost approach in general? What do we know?
Um, with the kind of the oh my goodness, the cost approach just focusing solely on the cost of the property versus
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna say here the cost approach, and you can just, you can make your if your notes aren't messy, you're doing it wrong.
oh, mine are messy.
So we're gonna say the cost approach You're figuring out the cost. But what does cost mean? When you're saying you're figuring out the cost, what does that mean exactly? Isn't that the same as coming up with value? Are cost and value the same?
Ye- Yeah. So.
So it's actually not. It's actually not. Cost versus value. So look, now we can do a whole new kind of like it's I want you to dig down deep when you're doing these and kind of figure out what you know and what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So cost is what it takes to build or make something. Right? Value is what the appraiser finds. It's an appraiser's opinion of value, right? It's what the
Okay.
appraiser thinks something is worth. And that is different than a price. And that's what somebody is willing to pay. So, for example, if I wanted blackberry jam, I could go to the store, buy some. What do you make jam with? I don't know. Pectin, Jello, gelatin. What I don't know. I'm gonna need some blackberries. I'm clearly gonna need some sugar. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never made jam, but then I'm gonna have to have the glass containers and the way to seal it with the lids. And then I think that you need a pressure cooker to do this. Like the cost of making blackberry jam, if I just said from scratch right now would I'd probably be like $100 later. I got one thing of blackberry jam because I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to buy the pot and all the things and all the materials that go along with it, right? That's the cost. Versus at some point, there's a manufacturer, manufacturer's retail price. Like this is the price that Smuckers thinks I should pay for their already done blackberry jam. Now, Smuckers may think that their jar of blackberry jam is worth $5.99. I'm like, I ain't paying $5.99 for a jar of jam. But if it
Mm.
goes on sale for $3.99, then that's the price I'm willing to pay. Just because an appraiser says a house is worth, 499,000 doesn't mean that somebody's going to be willing to pay 499,000.
Mm-hmm. That's yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I mean, I know there's different ways to talk about mind mapping, but this is a little, I'm not even gonna call it a mind map, but it's a way to organize or think about the information. Cost versus value versus price. We've talked about, and this is where you can come back and look at, okay? We talked about what does cost mean? Well, if we say, how does it connect to the big picture? All right, well, an appraiser comes up with price in order to find value, or they come up with a value, or I'm sorry, appraiser figures out value. In order to come up with value, they might need to use the cost approach, and then they'll be talking about the cost. How much does it take to build it or make it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just because the appraiser said, here's the value, that doesn't necessarily mean somebody's going to pay for it. They're going to pay whatever the price is that they're willing to pay. You get what I'm saying there?
Yes, that cleared the waters.
Yes. Because, and I'm thinking it cleared the water because now you know what it is. But if you know why it's important and you know how they relate, it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to place it in here. Does that make sense?
Yes. Finding a
So,
little home for them to, yeah.
yeah, like everything is interconnected, but everything doesn't have to necessarily be I joke around and I'm saying I could make a mind map of this entire class. That sounds scary because those are going to be so many overlapping lines. Well, this relates to this, and it relates to this, and it relates to this, and it relates to that. But maybe I break it down and say, okay, before I go on to putting it on the giant, big, overlapping what is appraisal, I need to understand it at a smaller,
Mm-hmm.
in a smaller sense. Like, do I know how cost relates to value, which relates to price?
Yeah, just breaking it. Yes, I see.
Breaking it down. And in my mind, when I say mind map, I mean breaking it down and making relationships to things that you already know, which is one of my favorite questions on here. Number three, how does it relate to what I already know?
Hmm.
Make sense, Jess?
Yes.
So I don't want you to look at it as being like one sided, any word. It relates to something somehow.
Yeah.
And we just went off kind of on a tangent, but it's a good learning tangent because all of that was related to, well, what is the cost approach? How does the cost approach differ from the sales comparison approach to the income approach? Well, the cost approach is finding the cost, and then you're going to depreciate it. Versus the sales comparison approach. Remember, that's what you said the first time. You said, oh, I find similar properties to base value on.
I like
Versus
it.
versus the income approach, which is based on how much income a property brings in. I want all of your words, all of your concepts to relate.
Hmm.
They don't have to necessarily relate. And a mind map is not about putting every single thing you know about something here. It's about using the visual to chunk the information, to put it together, to group the information so it makes sense. So the information kind of has a home in
Hmm.
your knowledge base. And then as you fill out, as you get to know the information, because right here, right now, I could say, if we stopped, I could say, hey, do you understand, how the sales comparison approach versus the cost approach and how the income approach are all different ways that an appraiser comes up with value, and how those are going to be their own topic with their own, each is going to have their own methods versus talking about, oh, for something to have value, it has to have demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. Like it's different.
Hmm.
It's the baking technique versus, hey, here are the cooking tools. Like it goes to a different place. It has a home. There's a reason why it's important. You need to know, hey, this is what an appraiser does to come up with value versus the appraiser needs to know what value is in order to find it. Is this making sense? I don't know if it's too.
No, yeah, I really like this. I just like the visual and just making all the lines to connect everything, and then it just, I
And
like it.
notice one thing I haven't done is connected everything. What I
Yes.
have not done, and I'm going to do this so that I don't have to erase something, but I could say, hey, you know what? A CMA is going to use the sales comparison approach, and a BPO could also use the sales comparison approach, right?
Hmm.
Those lines just crossed over. You're like, whoa, what just happened? Why are we all over there? Or I could just go ahead and say, How does a CMA and the sales comparison approach, you know, compare and contrast? That's something you could study.
Mhm.
That gives you a an understanding. Like if you're going to be able to talk to me about how a CMA is similar to the sales comparison approach and how is it different than the sales comparison approach, well, then that gives you an opportunity to understand what is a CMA versus what is the sales comparison approach. What do you do in a CMA versus what do you do in a sales comparison approach? It goes beyond just the definitions, but also, if you do the mind map, you're saying, oh, one is found by a broker, one is found by an appraiser. So you're relating it kind of all together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we might as well go ahead and continue this. So, what I would tell you to do is if we were talking about the cost approach, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen it before, but I'm going to draw it out. We're going to just take this age life method and erase it for a second. Because in the cost approach, I know that an appraiser, let's choose a different color. How about that purpley? There's basically 3 steps. First, you have to figure out how much to rebuild. Then you're going to figure out how you're going to price the rebuild. And then you've got to figure out how you're going to depreciate it. Because in the cost approach, the appraiser is saying, look, I didn't use the sales comparison approach because I didn't have good comps. And I could use the income approach, but if it's a normal everyday residential house, I don't know how much income it produces. Oh, what? None. Nobody, you pay a mortgage, but it doesn't bring any money into you. Not really. You get a little bit from equity, appreciation, but it doesn't really bring anything. It's not like owning an apartment complex or an office building where you're renting out the spaces. Like it doesn't bring in income. That's not a good way to come up with value. Right? Instead, the appraiser is saying, all right, well, if I had to go out and get this and buy this, it's like buying a used car. If the used car was new and it didn't have any miles on it, it'd be like, it's worth $55,000. The minute you drive it off the lot, it's worth $45,000. Oh, and then I don't know, like if you've turned in a cell phone or anything, even a car, they're like, oh, what's the condition? It's got a scratch. Oh, does it, how many miles does it have? We got to depreciate it. That's what the sales comparison approach is doing. It is saying, okay, I got to figure out how I'm going to rebuild it. I've got to figure out how much would it cost me to rebuild it. And then I've got to depreciate it. And then there's words and vocab that goes into each of those steps. So now we have another little map
Yeah.
that we're connecting.
Hmm.
So I happen to know when it goes into rebuilding, we got 2 options. You could either reproduce it or you could replace it. Do those words, replacement value, reproduction value, do those sound familiar?
Yeah.
And do you happen to know the difference between them?
Nice. Reducing the, I'm scared I'm gonna say something
Well, let's
silly.
think. We're talking about how to rebuild. What would be the difference between reproducing something, the reproduction value, versus replacing it, the replacement value? If you're reproducing versus replacing. Well, I'll tell you how I remembered. Replace has that soft C, which
Mhm.
sounds like a soft S, or I mean, not that S's get soft, but that sound,
Mhm.
which makes me think of the word similar.
Okay.
So in the replacement, we are building something similar. And reproduction, that's hard C, makes me think of the word exact. So we're making exactly the same. Well, what do I mean by that? I always give the example of my dad, which it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Daddy. I
You
don't
have
actually think he'll uh see this, but that's okay, which is
no.
hilarious. My funny story of the day is my dad always wishes me, he wants to be the first person to wish me happy birthday. So he always
Oh,
does like the day before or 2 days before, sometimes a week before. Am I the first one? So I wanted to call him last night and be the first one. But my dad got me a massage chair for Christmas last year. Not this past year, but the year before that. Girl, I sat down at like 10:30 and I woke up at 12:30, like, what? Who am I?
yeah, like
Where
where is
am
it?
I? What day is it? Oh crap. I was like, I missed the early birthday.
Oh
I called him at
no.
12:30, which he woke up to answer the phone so I could be like, happy birthday. But I was like, this is your fault. I fell asleep
Yeah,
in the chair. It's your fault, Dad.
too comfortable.
I was so, girl, I was knocked out. The
Oh, I
older you
cannot
get, the
imagine.
more those massage chairs are great.
I
So,
bet.
having said that, my dad lives in downtown Detroit. Like it's
Mhm.
Detroit, Detroit, and he lives in a historic home. So my dad's walls are plaster. They're not drywall. So if I mean, now luckily in his area, there are lots of older homes, but you know how sometimes you live in an area and there's only like one or two older homes?
Mhm.
In that scenario where he was in a neighborhood with mostly new homes and somebody had just preserved this particular historic home, does it make sense that you wouldn't have enough information to do the sales comparison approach?
Yeah.
Right. So when we look at this, an appraiser has to find value. He's going to say, hey, do I have enough comps? No. All right. Then do I need to rebuild it? Or does it make income? See how an appraiser is going to ask that question?
Mhm.
So the appraiser is going to say, okay, well, yeah, it doesn't make income. Fine. I don't have enough comps. So let me use the cost approach. When I rebuild it to make this work, do I want to find somebody who knows how to work plaster to make plaster walls and the cost of finding the plaster and getting the tools to make plaster? Or do I just want to roll up to Home Depot and get me some drywall? That's the difference. Reproduction would be plaster walls.
Mhm.
Replacement would be drywall. Or like he's got not a balcony, but what do you like the rails on his
Mhm.
stairs? Do we want to find somebody to cut down the trees, to cut the wood, to prepare the wood, to, saw down the wood and do whatever it took in the early 1900s to build that? So that would be a reproduction versus do we want to just find some handrails at Home Depot? Replacement.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mhm.
And so when you're going through and you're mind mapping, it doesn't have to be everything all at once. Your mind map is let me place the information. I want it to be a visual representation of where does this information go? And ask yourself, well, why is this actually important? Is there going to be a price difference between finding the guy to make the plaster walls and going to Home Depot?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, right?
Jen.
Now, sometimes these questions you won't be able to do anything with. Like, how is it similar to other things I know? If I'm talking about replacement versus reproduction, I don't know if it's similar to something else in and of itself, but I do know the cost approach is similar to the sales comparison or the income approach because there are ways that an appraiser could find value. Like it has a category. it has a place to go within our knowledge base. Is that helping?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So if we continue on with our cost approach, we had to figure out, I should say, not how much to rebuild, but how to rebuild. Am I going to reproduce it or am I going to replace it? Now, it turns out once you know if you're going to reproduce or replace, you got three options here. And you know what? I'm going to change colors just so we don't mix it up. You got three options here. You have the square foot method. You have the unit in place method. And you have the, oh my gosh, you have the square foot method, the unit in place method, oh my gosh. So when this happens, and this is going to happen to you too, I use this list all the time. Sometimes I'm like, okay, square foot method, quantity survey method. That's what I'm looking for. Like I had to look over my list to find the word.
1, 2, 7 method.
So it's the quantity survey method. And then I could compare and contrast those. Well, the square foot method is like when you go to new construction. If you say you want a 4,000 square foot house, isn't there going to be a difference between whether or not you have an amazing kitchen and bathroom versus 2,000 of the square feet are just downstairs basement that's finished?
Yeah.
So the square foot method is just giving a flat price per square foot. The unit in place method says how much is HVAC and then how much is electrical and how much is roofing and how much is flooring. Do you see how that would give you a closer true cost?
Yeah.
And then you have the quantity survey method. That's when they're going to want to know how many nails, how many doorknobs, how many feet of pipe, how many, how many 3x4s, 2x4s.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally breaking it down to every single little item, including uh, profit and labor. Now, of these three, which is probably going to be the easiest way to come up with a how we're going to price this out?
Wouldn't it just be the flat price?
Yeah. And which one is an appraiser probably going to look at you and be like, but why? Why would you have me do this?
Quantity.
Great. I mean, exactly. So, can you see how that might, we say, like, why is this important? Because it's going to affect the accuracy of the appraisal.
Oh, that would be terrible, just counting out every single nail.
Now, the truth is that quantity survey method is usually used for like architects, like when people really have to dig down deep into numbers. The most popular one is the unit in place method. Right. So we got two steps so far. The cost approach, we had to figure out how we're going to rebuild it. Then we had to figure out how we're going to price it. And then we got to depreciate it. And guess what? It turns out there's two different ways to come up with depreciation. There's the breakdown method, or there's the age straight life. straight life or line method, whatever. I see it called anything. It's called different things, different places, whatever, but you'll get the point.
Mhm.
So, any clue to what the breakdown method is? Do you have, when we look at this list of words, does this, any word on here look like it could maybe have to do with the H? And it doesn't matter if you don't know. We're just, any chance you know?
Mm,
I'm going to add one word and you tell me if you know the other two words that go with it.
oh boy.
One word, obsolescence, or economic obsolescence. Do you remember what the other words are?
Uh, Functional.
Functional obsolescence. And
Um, is it physical deterioration? Okay, I was like,
yes.
one of those.
And do you remember what the difference is between those?
Economic is surrounding the property, just
Yep.
the economy is how I remember that. Functional is just how it functions, if it's doing well or if it has some issue, and then physical
I
is
say this. I say MP threes versus an 8 track. Do you know what I'm talking about? So if you had a car, would you agree if it has an 8 track player, it is functionally obsolete versus if it can play, connect to your Apple, your iPhone?
Mhm.
You getting what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Like if you had a house that had fuses instead of, actual like fuses instead of, yeah, that's what we mean by functionally obsolete. A 4 bedroom, 1 bath house. Mhm. And then you got physical deterioration, which is just the
Appearance.
physical shape of it. Getting how this is going, yeah?
Yeah.
And then you could spend some time studying, okay, what are some of the questions that I've seen on this? What do I know? How have they asked me this before? How do I recognize it? Because we want to break down, do I actually know what it is? So in general, are you feeling better about even these parts of, appraisal?
Yes.
And we're not going quickly by any means. And I think that's something that people think, oh, studying should go quick and easy. No, it is detailed and understanding, and you might have to come back to this because
Mhm.
I'm always telling people, in fact, let me ask you, what's your favorite song? Like if you had to listen to the same song all day for 24 hours, what is that song that you're like, you know what, it's my favorite, I might actually not get tired of it?
Probably I'm obsessed with Renee Rapp right now.
Renee Rapp, I don't know her.
She's a rising star. She,
Ooh, I'm writing that down. Look what
her,
Renee Rap. What kind of music?
it's like just kind of pop. It's very, just, it hits good, you
Two
know?
P's in rap.
Yeah,
Okay. RAPP, Renee Rap.
yeah,
Okay. I'm gonna look her up. So you could listen to that song all day. The first time for whatever the favorite song is, how many times did you listen to it in order to know all the lyrics?
like five.
So you didn't just listen to it once. You had to revisit it 5 times. And it's one of your favorite songs. So you already had interest in it. And you still had to listen to it 5 times. What does that mean on how many times we're going to have to look at the breakdown method? Because let's be honest, are you really interested in it?
No, but I need to be.
So if it took 5 times for something you love, how many times are you going to need to revisit this to really memorize it and know it as well as you know your favorite song?
Frequently.
Which takes us all the way back. I love when things come together. I love when a plan comes together because that takes us back to, oh, what am I looking? Our chart of forgetting.
Yep.
Our chart of forgetting says, hey, the more you review it, the better you're going to remember it. But if you only listen to the song once, you were going to forget 90% of the song. I mean, like you only listen, the first time you listen to one of your favorite songs, it was like at the end of a phrase, the words that rhyme, right? You're like, oh yeah, hey, bae, slay. I got those words because my favorite part of the
Yeah.
song. Baby, hey. You sing the big words in the song. And
Mm-hmm.
then every so often you'll be like, I know this phrase because you're my bae. Because you're
Mm-hmm.
my bae. Like then you got you're my bae. And then you got a little bit more of the phrase until you could do the whole song.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I kind of want your mind map to do. I want your mind map to be like, oh, I need to know what is value and I need to know how to find value. And then the next time I'm going to be like, I know how we find value. We could either be an appraiser or we could be a broker. And then you're going to fill in, well, if it's an appraiser, it's this and this and this. And then you're starting from the top down and you're filling in not just the words that rhyme, but all the details. Because what do we know about the stinking test? Does it only test you on the large concepts?
It's everything. All the
It's
pebbles.
the detail.
The
Make
pebbles.
sense?
Yeah.
So if we're looking, like we've done a little bit of outlining. We've done actually a little bit, but a lot. So when
Mm-hmm.
we go back to not that, but so many documents I use when I'm helping you. So pick any word on here. Oh.
Highest and best use.
Highest and best use. So we've got to figure out from our chart, where does it relate? Like, where could this possibly go? And look at it from the top. And I meant to get off that layer. So you just have to ignore the yellow on there. But highest and best use, we got to figure out on just our main levels. Does it have to do with what is value? Does it have to do with how to find value? Now, of course, because you love me, you picked a word that's kind of in the middle. And this is why I would say it. I'm going to put highest and best use. Now, this is like an extra
Okay.
because I want to show you, well, truthfully, it relates to what is value. When we talk about value, if you have let's say you have a diamond, and we know diamonds are one of the toughest, things on earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is a better use of it to be in a diamond ring or to use it to scrub pots and pans?
Diamond ring.
Right. So when we talk about highest and best use, we're talking about a use that's legal, that's, can actually happen, like all of those things. So when we talk about value, value comes from looking at its highest and best use. Don't tell me that it's worth $2 because it doesn't clean pans very well. No, it's worth $2 million because it's 5 carats. Like, and
Yeah.
it's pretty.
It's really pretty. It's really
Yeah,
shiny.
it's really shiny and pretty, and we want one. So that's how highest and best use relates to value.
Mm-hmm.
But it also turns out that when an appraiser is coming up with any of these, like when he or she is trying to decide between the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, or the income approach. In fact, I'm going to change that line. Going to put it here. When they take a look at what the house is worth, should they look at it by what did other people pay for houses that lived in them? Or should they look at it by, oh, people are going to be rebuilding it and there's not going to be something similar. So I need to rebuild it and depreciate it. Or is he going to say, oh, you know what? The best use of this 4 bedroom, 3.5 bath house is to rent it out. Like, is it
Mm-hmm.
going to make a lot of money for the income approach? Are there not going to be a lot of, because it's unique.
Mm-hmm.
So we know our cost approach is for unique things. I should use the cost approach because I'm not going to find similar things. Or is it, yeah, I'm going to probably find really similar comps. The highest and best use is people are living in it. There's going to be lots of people living in similar houses. So I should probably use the sales comparison approach.
Yes.
Kind of getting what I'm saying there?
I'm catching what you're putting down.
Yay! So all of this comes together because what I would tell you to do is maybe 3 days later, you decide to study this again. So you could do this a couple ways. You could try to recreate this yourself. You could try to say, okay, our overall topic is appraisal slash valuation. And I know if I have that, then I need to talk about what it means versus how to find value. And I know if I'm finding value, it's either done by the broker or it's done by the appraiser. You get what I'm saying there? Now, this doesn't even look the same quite yet. There's this one that's pretty ugly, but I mean, they're both not pretty, but this one has more detail. And then you go through and you see what you remember off the top of your head. And even if you can't remember exactly where it is, like let's say you think of the word scarcity, right? You could look at this chart and be like, scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. You know what? I think it had something to do with over here. Then when you look at it, you go, oh no, it doesn't go over here. Scarcity goes over here.
Mhm.
And that's going to prompt you to go learn more about how does scarcity fit into all of this.
Okay.
Yay?
Yes. Yay.
Yay. And some stuff will be really easy. Some stuff will be, when I say easy, I mean it'll be really easy to
Mind map?
mind map. Well, I mean, well, because I could do something like let's just use plain black. Estates. How many times have you seen that chart that talks about freehold versus non-freehold? And you know, if it's non-freehold, you have the tenancy for years, and then you have the periodic, and then you have at will, and then you have at sufferance. I know you've seen this chart before, right? Like some things are already charted out. But just because they're charted out doesn't mean you can't say, let me compare and contrast
Mhm.
these things. How are they similar? How are they not similar? And then you could go big picture again. You can take this non freehold and take it to big picture, which could be landlord tenant. And then I would tell you to make a list of all the words you could think of behind landlord tenant. And then I would tell you, so, make a list. Then step 2, I would tell you to big picture it. So, you might talk about if I were to do this, if I did landlord tenant, I might say, well, for when I'm talking about this, I have stuff that is actual landlord tenant, and then I have the property management side. And then if I have actual landlord tenant, I'm going to have some laws. And then I'm going to have best practices. Like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Big picture it. And then step 3 would be fill it in. Because you could spend a whole day just talking about laws that have to do with landlord tenant.
Mhm.
And then you would go through and compare and contrast them. Because honestly, in comparing and contrasting, you have to know what they mean, right? And this is going to give you the ability, once you know what they mean, to really dig down. Why is it important? What questions have I seen on it before? This gives you the ability to come all the way back here. And for every word, what does it mean? How does it connect to the big picture? What does it relate to what I already know? Like, why is it important? How is it similar to other things I've learned? Like, what is similar to, if I think of something like a stated for years, right? And a stated years for state for term. If you ask me to think of something I know that's similar, I would say it's kind of similar to a life estate. Why? Because a life estate was never going to be forever. A life estate is always going to end because somebody is always going to die.
Mhm.
And an estate for years means it was for that one period and then it's over. If it's a life estate, people don't come back to life. Oh, it's popped up again. It's mine again. An estate for years or estate for term, it's for that one term. And when it's over, it's over.
Mhm.
So you can connect, like, how is it similar to other stuff Like, because we're trying to learn the information because we know part of the test will be application and analysis. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to do one more thing, which is we started this talking about finance.
Yeah.
So if we have finance, can you think of a word that has to do with borrowing money, just at all? Just any word that had to do with finance.
Mortgage.
Okay, mortgage. And what does it mean to mortgage a mortgage? What does that mean?
Um, Using your home as collateral.
Okay, so in the finance chapter, we could talk about creating collateral. And now you got mortgage, right? Think of another word that has to do with, like, maybe I think of the word FHA. How does FHA relate to finance? Like, what is FHA? Like, how
Um,
does type of loan?
huh?
A type of loan? Like an FHA mortgage as a type of
Yeah,
loan?
and then you have the VHA, right?
Well, yep, you got types of loans. So you could have FHA, you could have VA, you could have conventional. And then you would go back to your chapter, your book, and see, okay, when I learned about finance, I learned about types of loans. I learned about, how things are created with collateral. We talked about foreclosures. We talked like foreclosure types. We talked about, the secondary mortgage market, right? We talked about interest rates. We talk about I'm gonna stop there. But does it also, like, once you do that and you relate it, it kind of seems to me I could take foreclosures and interest rates and move those under mortgages
Mm-hmm.
because the idea is to chunk and simplify, relate it.
Yeah.
So it's a living, breathing document. And I don't know, I mean, you see how I've been like moving around this chart, like, and it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an iPad or a
I
tablet?
do. Yeah.
Okay, then this app is called Concepts. And I think it's like 9.99 or something. But what I love about it is it's an endless, and you know how like Excel is an endless possible spreadsheet? It could be 3 lines or it could be 3 gazillion lines.
Mm-hmm.
Concepts is the same way. So when you come back to it,
Oh, that's
right,
nice.
you can just come in and we could have something all the way over here. and you can do layers. Like I can hide layers and all of these things. And
What?
then you can send it out as so I like concepts. Now, don't get me wrong. I like you've seen me use Procreate before. But the problem with Procreate is it's one piece of paper.
Okay,
But
yeah.
you could use it like you could say, hey, I'm going to mind map the cost approach.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do a little mind map of, okay, there's one, there's two, there's three steps in the cost approach. And you could do something small. Once you do it like this way, you could export this and then stick it not there, stick it, right here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I like concepts because I want you to think and really dig deep into it.
I like that. I'm gonna have to invest.
I really actually don't think it's all that expensive. I don't I can't do it because I own it. If I try to pull it up, it'll just say open. But
Yeah, no.
you can look and see what it is. But one of the things I know we wanted to talk about today was how could you kind of dig deeper into learning and the understanding and the making it stick better? Will
Yeah.
this help?
Yes. A lot. I think just even just following you, like I was just drawing it. So like I have my own thingy going on. So
Yeah.
I like having all the colors and it's just like it clicks better for me. It's just
Good. And then what I would tell you is like what we've done today, see if you could simplify it even more. Like redo it, try to fill it in yourself. Are there ways to connect the information in different ways? Are there ways where you could group or, the things together, like
Mhm.
chunk it together in different ways? Because that's when you really truly understand. Because we was talking about cooking, couldn't we talk about cooking as in what time of day? We could start talking about, hey, you tend to not bake in the morning. That's usually a dessert after dinner type thing. And if
Yeah.
you're deep frying, it's probably going to be a dinner or breakfast type of thing. Where
Mhm.
so you can group information in all sorts of ways. And when you can do that, then you know you've learned it. So mind mapping to me is I don't want it to be overwhelming. Like sometimes when people, and that's something that if you do a search on YouTube, you'll find people going, mind mapping is too much. And I usually say that's because you're trying to look at too much material. If you're trying to study all evaluation in one sitting, it is too much.
Yeah, that'd be overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. So use the mind map to figure out where does the information flow and then break it down. So you go from the top, like the big picture, to the next level, to the next level, to the next level until you get to where the details go. Or if you do a question and they're talking about, or you see a vocab word that you've never seen before, maybe it is reconciliation. Try to figure out where reconciliation would go on here, which means, okay, well, I'm going to have to look up what reconciliation is. And once you do that, you'll find out reconciliation is what happens. And this is going to be really weird, but I'll try it. Reconciliation is what happens. Sometimes an appraiser has to use all three methods, and then they're going to make one final value. Like this thing is worth $799,787. Like reconciliation is them coming up with that one final value,
Cheapers.
right? But you see now how it relates.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, it's not going to be, it shouldn't be, nor will it be kind of as easy as I'm doing it because I know what it means. You
Yeah.
figuring out where the connections are, you figuring out how does this relate? How could I place it on my mind map? Then coming back to that mind map, looking at what you've created and saying, okay, how could I simplify this even more? How can I chunk it differently? How can I look at relationships differently? And then doing it again, just like you listen to your favorite song 5 times, reviewing it and relating it and connecting it over and over and over, then it starts to stick more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And like I
excited.
said, if you don't believe me, I think you do, but if you don't believe me, watch some of those videos. I'm gonna send you that PDF of, and I'm telling you, my favorite guy is this Justin Sung guy. Like he TED Talk, man. I mean, he
Legit.
TED Talks. He's legit. I watch so much of his stuff. I took courses on how to study, which is how I did my webinar on like what it all means. But
Okay.
he is awesome. He is awesome for really understanding what it means to study the encoding, breaking it down, how to mind map, how to use flashcards. Like, do not go too far deep into the rabbit hole. You will go into a really deep rabbit hole of what does it mean to learn? If you want the basics kind of summed up, just get my webinar. But if
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about the Cornell method, if you were taking naps in class, or you wanted to do mind mapping even better and kind of dig deep into why this all works, these are the videos for you.
I would definitely check them out, but I'm super excited. I like the mind mappings.
I
Uh,
do
You can
too.
add like you just make it all pretty
I
and
don't want you to get too far deep into the pretty. Pretty is good,
yeah.
but so, and I'm just going to say this, and it's not that I want to kill your happiness, but I don't want your mind map to look something like here's a word, and then you have a connection here, and a connection here, and a connection here, and a connection here. And then this word right here connects here, and it connects here right there. And then you got this word, and then it connects over here, and it connects over there, and it connects over there. And then all of a sudden you're like, do you get what I'm saying? The difference is?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I
Right? And it should all be about relations and connections. You don't have to write every single thing down, but you should be able to relate between this item versus like this item if you talk about it. What's
yeah.
that connection or how do they both relate back there? Keep it
Mhm.
simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple and then dig into the details.
Yes.
Yay, we didn't get to go through finance today, but that's okay.
Sorry.
But we did talk about the difference between the finance section and the appraisal section, which is what we know finance is about the borrowing of money. And we know that appraisal is about the
Value.
value.
Yeah.
Does that, at a very basic level, make more sense now when you look at the chapter breakdowns?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
I feel more
Yay.
calm, cool, and collected.
Wow. It is a lot. You know, it's a lot. And I love how we've grown and I've seen you recognize the information, you know what it is. And I'm really hoping this will help you connect it and make it more part of like your favorite song, that you know it and you understand it and not just, oh, I mean, I think it real kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah. I want to be competent.
Yay. I like it. All right, ma'am. Well, then I will see you next time, okay?
We thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I can't wait till our next section or session. Bye.
Bye.